My boss demanded absolute obedience, so I obeyed until the building started to crack. The first time Denise said the word obedience out loud, I honestly thought she was joking. We were packed into conference room B with its sad fern and the TV that always angled slightly left, like it was embarrassed to show spreadsheets. Denise stood at the front with a clicker and that bright, controlled smile she used when she wanted applause for something nobody asked for. Team, she said, drawing the word out like she was tasting it. We have a consistency problem. She tapped the screen and a slide appeared. Obedience protocol, effective immediately. I felt Jamal beside me stiffen. He'd already been written up for tone in an email where he'd said, per my last message. Denise continued, from this moment forward, we follow the process exactly. No freelancing, no shortcuts, no helpful detours. She made air quotes around helpful like it was a slur. I work claims intake for a property management company, which sounds boring until you're the person telling a tenant their ceiling leak is non-emergency because the policy says so while they're texting you photos of brown water dripping into a baby's crib. Our office is all glass walls and artificial lemon cleaner, and the phones never stop because the buildings are old and everyone's always mad at us. Denise had been here 6 months and somehow already acted like she'd invented roofs. Priya whispered, obedience? Are we in a cult? I kept my face neutral because Denise had a habit of catching expressions and logging them like defects. She clicked again. New rules filled the screen. All calls must be logged within 3 minutes. No outbound calls without manager approval. All tenant emails must use the approved templates. No edits, no added sentences. Every request must go through the ticketing portal, even if the portal is down. All exceptions require written permission from Denise, submitted via the exception request form, which would be reviewed within 48 business hours. Jamal raised his hand like he couldn't stop himself. What about active leaks? Denise's smile tightened without moving her eyes. Follow the protocol. If it's an exception, request an exception. If someone's ceiling is Jamal, she cut in softly, obedience removes confusion. The room went quiet in that specific way it does when adults realize nobody's coming to rescue them. Denise looked straight at me then, like she'd been saving this part. Nora, you're our most capable improviser. I want you to model this. Model this. Like we were mannequins. Of course, I said, because my rent auto pays on the first, and my dad's prescriptions don't wait for my pride. Denise's eyes gleamed. Great. Starting today, I expect strict, literal compliance. Exactly as written. No interpretation. She clicked the remote off, and the TV went black, reflecting our faces back at us like a warning, and Denise said almost pleasantly, show me you can obey. Denise emailed the protocol at 9:02 a.m. with a PDF attachment named Obedience Final V32 PDF, which already felt like a threat, and by 9:06, she'd walked the floor holding a stack of fresh printouts like communion wafers. She put one on my desk, tapped it twice, and said, you'll set the example, Nora. I pinned it to the corkboard beside my cheap calendar, and because she'd said literal, I started treating every line like it was a legal document. I opened a stopwatch app and left it running in the corner of my monitor. Call comes in. Tenant, shaky voice. Hi, my kitchen ceiling is bubbling and... I clicked, new call, hit start, and kept my voice warm because I'm not a monster. I'm so sorry. Please submit a ticket through the portal and attach photos. She laughed, the kind of laugh that's basically a sob. I'm calling because the portal won't load. It's been down since last night. I glanced at the protocol. Every request must go through the portal, even if the portal is down. No interpretation. Okay, I said, and it tasted like pennies. Then I'm unable to intake the request until the portal is available. Silence, then a hard inhale. Are you serious? Water is coming out of my light fixture? My timer hit 2:41. All calls must be logged within 3 minutes. I typed fast and clean, portal unavailable. Advised tenant to submit via portal when restored, and clicked save at 2:58 like I was defusing a bomb. Can you call maintenance? She asked, voice rising. No outbound calls without manager approval. I can't place outbound calls without written approval, I said, hearing my own words like someone else's. Then get approval. Absolutely. I'll submit an exception request form. I pictured Denise's 48 business hours and swallowed. Priya rolled her chair over, eyes wide, whispering, Nora, what are you doing? Modeling, I whispered back, and sent the tenant the approved template email without adding a single human sentence. Thank you for contacting Property Services. Your request is important to us. I watched the reply ping back almost immediately. Important? My ceiling is falling. At 10:17, Denise stormed out of her glass office with her phone in hand. Why is Building C on fire in my inbox? Jamal muttered. Because it's literally on fire. And I slid my exception form printout across Denise's desk like a receipt. Per protocol, I said, calm as I could manage. I'm waiting on your written permission to call maintenance. And Denise stared at me long enough that I could see her deciding whether to break her own rules or break me first. Denise didn't pick up the exception request form like it was paper. She picked it up like it was evidence. Her nails clicked on the desk as she scanned the line where I'd checked outbound call to maintenance, and I watched her jaw work. Why, she said slowly, would you tell a tenant you can't help them? I kept my hands folded in my lap, because if I started gesturing, I'd start shaking. Because the portal is down, and the protocol says every request must go through the portal, even if the portal is down. And outbound calls need manager approval, I said, word for word, like I was reading her bedtime story. Behind her glass wall, people pretended to type while definitely listening. Denise's cheeks flushed that flat office pink. You could have used common sense, she hissed. The protocol says no interpretation, I said, and I swear Priya made a tiny choking sound from her desk. Denise stared at me like I'd slapped her with a stapler. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice into that HR safe whisper. Fine, I'm giving approval. Call maintenance. Now. I slid the form back toward her. I'll need written permission, I said, and her eyes went sharp. Nora. Strict, literal compliance, I reminded her, still polite, still steady. She snatched a pen, scribbled her signature so hard it tore the paper a little, and shoved it at me. Happy? Very, I said, which made her flinch like she wasn't sure if I was being sarcastic. I went back to my desk and called Marcos in maintenance. Hey, it's Nora. Building C, Unit 3B, active leak through a light fixture. Marcos swore softly in Spanish and said, Why am I hearing about this now? I glanced at the stopwatch still running on my screen, the same one I'd been using like a parole officer. Portal outage, I said, and he made a noise like he wanted to throw his phone into the ocean. By lunch, the portal was still down, and the phones were a wall of sound. Ceilings, mold, a stuck elevator with someone's dog inside. Every time someone begged me to just handle it, I answered with the protocol. I filled out exception request forms until my printer ran out of toner and the shared tray looked like it had snowed. Jamal leaned over and murmured, This is going to get ugly. And I whispered back, It's already ugly. I'm just labeling it. At 2:30, Denise called a quick huddle that turned into her pacing in front of our cubicles like a drill instructor in heels. We are getting complaints, she said too loudly. Someone is telling tenants we refuse service. Priya blinked. But that's literally, Denise snapped, no one speaks unless spoken to. Her gaze pinned me. Nora, from now on, you will CC me on every tenant email. I opened the protocol PDF on my second monitor, like muscle memory. That's a new rule, I said. Please send it in writing so I can comply exactly. Denise's smile came back, bright and mean. Oh, I will, she said, and my inbox pinged a second later with a new email subject line, addendum, immediate compliance required, and when I opened it, I saw she'd copied not just me, but her boss and HR. The addendum email was 3 sentences and somehow managed to be smug in Calibri. Effective immediately, Nora will CC Denise Harker on all tenant communications. Nora will not deviate from approved templates without written approval. Failure to comply will be documented. HR and Denise's boss, Jeff, were copied like decorative plants. I sat there staring at it, feeling that familiar split in my chest between panic and something colder. Priya mouthed, Oh my God, and Jamal just leaned back like he was settling in for a movie. I replied, All exactly once. Received. I will comply exactly as written. Then I did. Every email, every portal auto response I forwarded, every we're sorry your bathroom is flooding template Denise got. Not just the polite ones either. She got the ones where tenants typed in all caps and attached blurry videos of water pouring out of ceiling fans. I stopped softening anything because the templates weren't soft. A woman in Building F wrote, You people are going to kill someone. And the template answer, unchanged, said, Your request is important to us. I CC'd Denise. A guy with asthma begged for expedited mold remediation. Template, requests are processed in the order received. CC Denise. At 11:12, Denise stomped over and hissed, Stop copying Jeff on this nonsense. I kept my eyes on my screen and clicked send on another email. Your addendum CC'd you, I said, careful. It doesn't say anything about excluding anyone you included. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again, quieter. Use discretion. No interpretation, I said, and her nostrils flared. The portal finally came back around noon, but it came back wrong, spitting out errors and duplicating tickets, so everything looked like a disaster multiplied by 2. Denise wanted us to clean it up, but the protocol said all tickets must be logged within 3 minutes and no edits to templates, nothing about fixing broken systems. So I logged what I saw. I didn't merge duplicates, I didn't massage statuses. I put portal created 3 identical requests, processing an order received, and CC'd Denise. At 2:07, Jeff replied to the thread. Just one line. Denise, why are tenants being told we cannot intake emergencies? I watched the little scene icon appear under his message, like a blinking hazard light. Denise called me into her office and shut the door so fast the glass rattled. Up close, her perfume was sharp, like citrus trying to hide smoke. Are you trying to make me look bad? She said. My heartbeat was in my throat, but I kept my voice level. I'm following your written instructions exactly. You're flooding my boss with garbage. You asked for every communication, I said, and then, because she'd trained me, I added, If you want a different process, please send it in writing. Her eyes flicked to the camera dome in the corner like she remembered it existed. She inhaled, exhaled, and smiled again. That bright, controlled smile that never reaches her eyes. Fine, she said, turning to her computer. Let's put something in writing we can both live with. And I watched her fingers move as she drafted another email, the subject line forming letter by letter. Performance Improvement Notice. Nora Martin. Denise didn't print the Performance Improvement Notice immediately. She let it hang between us like a wet towel. The click of her keyboard was loud in her little glass cube, and I could hear the office outside it going on like normal life. Printers whirring, someone laughing too hard at something, the low moan of the HVAC. This isn't punitive, she said without looking at me. It's supportive. The subject line on her screen might as well have been a siren. She turned the monitor slightly so I could see the bullet points populating. Demonstrates inflexibility, escalates issues unnecessarily, creates confusion for tenants. I almost laughed at the last one, but I didn't, because she'd love that. Where does it say flexibility is required? I asked. Denise's smile sharpened. It's called being a professional. Your protocol is the written standard, I said, and she clicked her tongue like I was a child correcting her grammar. Nora, I need you to stop hiding behind documents. You told me strict, literal compliance, I said, and there it was again. That tiny flicker in her eyes like she couldn't decide if I was brave or stupid. She printed the notice and slid it across the desk. Sign acknowledging receipt? I read it slowly, not to be dramatic, but because I'd learned Denise loved speed. The notice cited failure to appropriately triage urgent requests, which, if I'd been allowed to triage, would have been funny. It also cited excessive escalation to leadership, referencing the CCs she demanded. At the bottom was a line, employee signature. Next to it, manager signature. Denise had already signed. I picked up my pen. The protocol didn't mention signing. It also didn't mention refusing. It did mention that all exceptions require written permission submitted via the exception request form. I'm happy to acknowledge receipt, I said, and Denise relaxed like she'd won. Then I wrote, very neatly, under the signature line, received 2:46 p.m. Will comply with all written directives exactly as written. I didn't sign the actual signature line. I wrote my name under my note and dated it. Denise's face changed. No, sign. Here. She tapped the line with a fingernail. The document says acknowledging receipt, I said, keeping my voice soft. And I acknowledged receipt in writing. You're playing games. I'm following what's written, I said, and her eyes went to the camera dome again, like it was a second person in the room she couldn't control. She snatched the paper, stood up, and opened the door so hard the latch clicked. Go back to your desk, she said, loud enough for Priya and Jamal to hear. People pretended not to look. Back at my desk, I found my email access suddenly lagging, then a pop-up. Your message cannot be sent. You do not have permission to send external emails. My stomach dropped. I refreshed. Same message. I could still send internal emails. Denise had removed my ability to respond to tenants, which in our job is like cutting a cashier's hands off. Jamal wheeled over and murmured, Did she just revoke your outbound? Priya whispered, Can she do that? I opened the protocol PDF again like it was a life raft. No outbound calls without manager approval. Nothing about outbound emails because Denise hadn't thought of that. I raised my hand slightly, like in school, and Denise looked up from her office with that yes glare. I kept my voice polite and clear. Denise, I no longer have permission to send external emails. Please provide written instruction on how to comply with the tenant communication requirement. And her smile from the morning came back, bright and dangerous, as she walked toward me with her phone already in her hand. Denise stopped at my desk with her phone angled like she was already recording, her voice pitched sweet for an audience. Nora, you will communicate with tenants through approved channels, she said, like I'd been trying to send smoke signals. I clicked the little lock icon on my email client again just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Still blocked. I can't send external emails, I said, turning my monitor slightly so she could see the error message. Please provide written instruction on how you want me to meet the tenant communication requirement. Her smile twitched. Use the portal. Tenants email us directly. The protocol says all tenant emails must use approved templates. I can't send them. I wasn't raising my voice, but I saw Priya's head tilt like she was listening harder. Denise inhaled through her nose. Fine, she said, tapping her phone. A second later, a Teams message popped up. From Denise Harker. Draft responses in Word. Send to me internally. I will send externally. I stared at it because it was so absurdly manual it felt like a prank, but it was written, and she'd said exactly as written. Received, I typed back, and I copied Jeff and HR into a new internal email titled Process Clarification, Tenant Communication, pasted Denise's team's instruction as a screenshot, and wrote, Per manager direction, I will draft all tenant responses in Word and forward internally for external delivery. Jamal's eyes went wide. You're really CCing Jeff again? He whispered. Denise included him once. I whispered back. No interpretation. The next hour turned into a conveyor belt. Phone call, log within 3 minutes, open Word, paste template, fill blanks, save file name like tenant response, BLDGC 3B 11:07 am.docx, attached to internal email to Denise. The work doubled, then tripled. Tenants replied to old threads asking why nobody answered. I couldn't respond, so I drafted more Word files. Denise's inbox started coughing smoke. At 12:19, she stormed out, cheeks flushed, and hissed, Stop sending so many. I didn't even look up from the timer. You said draft responses in Word and sent to you, I said. Every tenant email requires a response. Use judgment. No interpretation, I said, and her jaw clenched so hard I thought she'd crack a molar. Priya rolled over a sticky note that said, in tiny letters, Portal just crashed again, and my stomach sank because the phones were already lighting up like a Christmas tree. A tenant on the line said, My kid can't breathe in here. It smells like chemicals. And I could hear someone coughing in the background. Please submit a ticket through the portal. I started, then stopped because I could hear myself turning into a robot. The portal is currently unavailable, I corrected, and followed the protocol like a script. I'm unable to intake the request until the portal is available. So you're not helping? The tenant snapped. I clicked save at 2:57, started a new exception request form, and watched Denise's team status flip to do not disturb, while Jeff replied to my earlier email with just, set up a meeting, today. Jeff's meeting invite landed like a brick. 3:30 p.m., claims intake process review. Attendees, me, Denise, HR, Tanya, and Jeff. The location was Jeff's office, which meant the carpet would be slightly cleaner, and the air would smell like expensive coffee instead of lemon disinfectant. Denise marched past my desk without looking at me, phone pressed to her ear, whispering like she was trying to rewrite reality in real time. Priya leaned close and murmured, "If she throws you under the bus, I'll back you up." And Jamal said, "I'm bringing popcorn." But his eyes were serious. At 3:27, Denise finally flipped her team status back to available and sent me a message. "Bring all documentation." I stared at that for a second. All documentation. Strict, literal compliance. I opened my folder. I'd been saving everything because it felt like survival. The original protocol PDF, the addendum email, the team's instruction about word drafts, my internal emails with screenshots, the exception forms piled like printer confetti, and the outgoing email error message. I printed the lot. The printer groaned like it resented me personally. By 3:30, I was walking down the hall with a binder so thick it bent at the spine, and Tanya from HR gave me a look halfway between curiosity and please don't make me stay late. Jeff's office had a glass wall too, but with blinds you could actually close, which already told you something about power. He gestured to the chairs and said, "Let's keep this efficient." Denise sat with her hands folded, posture perfect, smile on like a mask. I sat with my binder on my lap, feeling the weight of paper like a physical anchor. Jeff started, "We've had an uptick in tenant escalations. Denise says Nora is refusing to assist." Denise didn't even glance at me. "Nora has been obstructive," she said. "She's weaponizing policy to create chaos." I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Tanya's eyes flicked to me like she was waiting for a meltdown. Jeff nodded once, like he'd already decided the shape of the problem. "Nora?" I took a breath and slid the binder onto Jeff's desk. "I've been following written directives exactly as written," I said. I brought the directives. Denise's smile tightened. "We don't need—" Jeff held up a hand and flipped open the binder anyway. The first page was Obedience Final V3-2 PDF, printed clean. I'd highlighted the lines about portal-only intake and no interpretation. Jeff's brow furrowed. "Denise, did you write this?" "It's a standardization protocol," she said quickly. I turned a page, addendum email with Jeff and HR copied. Another page, Denise's Teams message instructing word drafts because my external email permission was revoked. Jeff's eyes moved faster now. Why was Nora's external email access removed? Denise's mouth opened, then closed. Security? She was copying leadership unnecessarily. I slid the printed error pop-up screenshot forward, the timestamp visible. "It happened after I requested written clarification," I said. Tanya leaned in, reading. The room was suddenly very quiet. Denise's legs started bouncing under the desk, the only sign she was human. Jeff looked up, voice sharper. "Denise, you told her to CC you on all communications, and you copied me. Then you claim she escalated unnecessarily." Denise's smile flickered, just for a second, like a light bulb struggling. "She knew what she was doing," she said, and I kept my voice steady even though my stomach was rolling. "I did exactly what was written," I said, and Jeff's gaze dropped back to the binder as if the paper itself could testify, his fingers turning the next page slower than the last. Jeff kept flipping pages like he was trying to find the point where the story stopped making sense, and every page made it worse for Denise. He paused on the exception forms, the stack of them, each with a timestamp and a blank approval box until her frantic signature slashed across the bottom. 48 business hours, he said, not to me, to Denise. "For leaks?" Denise's smile went brittle. "It's for accountability. People take liberties." Tanya cleared her throat, the HR version of a siren. "Denise, did you instruct staff to refuse intake when the portal is down?" Denise shifted in her chair, still keeping her hands folded like prayer. "No. I said follow the process." Jeff looked at me. "Nora, when the portal failed, what did you do?" I had this insane urge to apologize for being prepared, like preparation itself is rude. Instead, I slid another page forward. My call log timestamps next to the portal outage notice and the template emails that said what they said. "I followed the protocol," I said. "I requested exceptions in writing when the protocol blocked action." Denise laughed once, sharp. "She's being deliberately obtuse. Anyone could see what was meant." I kept my face still. "The protocol says no interpretation," I said, and Tanya's pen paused mid-note. Jeff leaned back, exhaled through his nose, and for the first time, Denise looked like she might actually be in trouble, not just annoyed. "Denise, we can't run a claims desk on a document that forbids judgment," he said. Denise's eyes flashed. "So, you're siding with her theatrics?" Jeff's voice stayed flat. "I'm siding with service delivery. This is a risk." Denise's head turned toward me like a knife. "She's undermining me." Tanya looked up. "Nora, did you intend to escalate to leadership?" I could have lied in a clean, socially acceptable way. Instead, I used Denise's language. "I intended strict, literal compliance," I said. "Denise required CCs and written approvals. I complied." Jeff drummed his fingers once on the desk, then said, "Okay, immediate changes." Denise sat straighter like she expected to be the one issuing them. Jeff continued, "We paused the obedience protocol, effective now. Nora's external email access is reinstated. Denise, you will submit any future process changes through operations for review before rollout." Denise's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Tanya nodded like she was stamping a form in the air. Jeff looked at me again. "Nora, you will document any instruction that contradicts policy and send it to Tanya. Understood?" My stomach tightened, because that was not a gift. It was a jaw with teeth. "Understood," I said. Denise stood so fast her chair legs squealed. "So she gets rewarded?" she snapped. Jeff didn't blink. "She gets to do her work." Denise's eyes locked on mine, and for a second the mask slipped, and what was underneath wasn't anger so much as calculation. She grabbed her phone, walked out without saying goodbye, and before I even made it back to my desk, my inbox pinged with a new internal email from Denise, subject line in all caps. Direct order, effective immediately. And Tanya's name was nowhere on the CC line. Denise's direct order email was 3 lines, no greeting, no signature, just that sterile managerial voice like she'd swallowed a handbook. 1. Effective immediately. All tenant-facing decisions for your queue must be approved by me before action. 2. Do not document internal disagreements in writing. 3. Do not involve HR or Jeff unless I authorize it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and I actually felt a little dizzy, like the floor had shifted half an inch. Priya swiveled toward me, saw my face, and mouthed, "What now?" Jamal leaned over my monitor without asking and let out a low whistle. She really just typed, "Do not document in writing." In writing. Denise's office blinds were half open. I could see her silhouette pacing, phone to her ear, doing that tight little stride like she was walking off rage. The problem was Jeff's instruction from 10 minutes ago. Document any instruction that contradicts policy and send it to Tanya. That was written in a meeting with HR present, and Denise had just sent me a written instruction that contradicted it, plus contradicted itself. I opened a new email to Tanya and stared at the blank too. Field like it was a cliff edge. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears. If I obeyed Denise, I'd be disobeying Jeff. If I obeyed Jeff, Denise would call it insubordination. Denise loved traps where either choice made you wrong, then she'd pick the one that hurt you most. I clicked the screenshot tool, captured Denise's email with the timestamp visible, and attached it to a message to Tanya that said, "Per Jeff's directive, forwarding written instruction that contradicts prior meeting guidance. Please advise next steps." I didn't add emotion. I didn't add commentary. I kept it as dry as printer paper. Then I hit send. Immediately my teams pinged. "Denise, come to my office, now." Priya grabbed my wrist lightly, eyes wide, and whispered, "Don't go alone." Jamal was already standing, like he'd been waiting for the bell. "We can't all go," I murmured, but my throat felt tight. Denise's typing appeared in Teams again, rapid-fire bubbles. "Bring your laptop." I picked it up, the cord snagging on the desk leg, and as I walked toward her glass door, I saw Tanya's little status dot flip to yellow, away, like a cruel joke, and Denise yanked her door open before I could knock, smiling like she'd been expecting me to sprint. Denise shut the door behind me, and the latch clicked like punctuation. Her office smelled like that same citrus something, but stronger, like she'd sprayed it to cover the fact she was sweating. "Sit," she said, pointing at the chair across from her desk. I didn't sit yet because she'd told me to bring my laptop, so I set it down first, opened it, and angled the screen toward her in that obedient little way she loved when it made her feel in control. Denise leaned over it immediately, scrolling with 2 fingers like she could rub the evidence off. "You went to HR," she said, voice low. "After a closed-door meeting where Jeff told me to," I said. And then, because she'd trained me into this shape, I added, "I have it documented." Her eyes snapped up. "No, you don't. You will not be documenting internal disagreements." She tapped the second line of her own email like it was scripture. "That is a direct order." I nodded slowly. "Understood. Please provide written instruction on how to reconcile your order with Jeff's order to document contradictions to HR." Her mouth opened in pure disbelief. "Are you hearing yourself?" "Strict, literal compliance," I said, and I hated how calm I sounded because it made her angrier. Denise stood, walked around the desk, and stopped behind me close enough that I could feel her presence like heat. "Listen," she said, dropping the sweet tone. "You are not protected because you printed a binder. You are an intake clerk. I can make your job small." My stomach did a slow roll. "Okay," I said carefully. "Tenant-facing decisions for my queue must be approved by you before action. I will follow that exactly." "Good," she snapped like she'd won. "Then start right now. I want you to retract the email to Tanya." I looked up at her. "Retract isn't an option in Outlook," I said, then glanced at my screen. "And that would be tenant-impacting process, so I'll need approval in writing for the specific action you want me to take." Denise's hand tightened on the back of my chair. "Nora, do not play dumb." "I'm not," I said, and my voice shook just a fraction, which made her smile. "Fine," she said, stepping away. "New instruction. From this moment, you do nothing unless I say so. You wait." I stared at her, then at the growing call queue blinking red on my screen, and I opened a blank exception request form while Denise reached for her phone again and said, too brightly, "Tanya, hi, it's Denise," like she hadn't just told me not to involve HR at all. Denise put Tanya on speaker without telling her, the little phone icon glowing on her desk like an accusation. "Hi, Denise." Tanya's voice came through, cautious. That HR calm that's never really calm. Denise smiled at me as if to say, "Watch this." "Quick clarifier," Denise said. "Nora is sending you internal disagreements that are confusing. I'm implementing a streamlined approvals process. No need to loop you in unless there's misconduct." Tanya paused. "Denise, I was in the meeting. Jeff requested documentation." Denise's smile tightened at the edges. "Right. And that's what I'm doing. Documenting through proper channels." She turned her eyes on me. "Nora will now route everything through me. That reduces noise." I kept my posture still and my hands flat on my laptop like I was in a police interview. Tanya said, "Denise, did you instruct Nora not to involve HR unless you authorize it?" Denise didn't miss a beat. "I advised her to follow the chain of command." Tanya's tone cooled a notch. Chain of command doesn't override reporting obligations. Denise's eyes flicked to me, warning. My inbox pinged. Another tenant email, another phone call. The red queue number climbed. Denise said, "We're aligned then," and ended the call before Tanya could answer. She looked satisfied for exactly 1 second. Then she noticed what I had opened. An exception request form. Blank except for my name, date, and the box checked, approval required prior to action. "What is that?" she snapped. "Per your direct order," I said softly. "Tenant-facing decisions for my queue must be approved by you before action. Intake is a decision. Responding is a decision. Logging status updates is a decision." Denise blinked like she hadn't considered her own sentence. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "Define what is not a decision," I replied, and I watched her realize she'd made herself a choke point. Outside her glass wall, I could see Priya hovering at her desk like she wanted to run interference. Jamal had his phone out, not filming, just open, thumbs poised like he was ready to text someone if I blinked wrong. Denise walked back around to her chair and sat hard. "Fine. You will bring me every item," she said. "Every call, every email, you bring it to me first." "Written?" I asked. Denise stared at me with pure hatred. "Yes," she said, yanking her keyboard closer. She typed fast, sent it, and my inbox immediately got clarification. All items must be approved by Denise prior to action. No CCs, no HR, no Jeff, just me. I replied, "Received," and stood up with my laptop. Denise frowned. "Where are you going?" "To bring you the first item for approval," I said, walking out into the open office with my screen visible, the call queue screaming red, and I stopped right beside Priya's desk so everyone could hear me ask, loud and polite. "Denise, tenant online says water is pouring through a light fixture. Do I have written approval to call maintenance, or should I submit an exception request first?" Denise froze for half a second, like she couldn't believe I'd brought her mess into daylight. Then she snapped, "Inside, now," with that thin smile that's supposed to look like leadership. But the office had already heard the words water, light fixture, and approval, and people's faces did that sympathetic wince you only see when someone knows the fire alarm is real. I kept my voice steady. "Per your clarification, all items must be approved by you prior to action. I'm asking for approval." Priya stared at her monitor like it was the most interesting thing on earth, but her ears were bright red. Jamal actually leaned back in his chair and said, not quietly, "Denise, quick. Are we allowed to breathe without approval?" Denise shot him a look that could peel paint. "Nora," she said louder, "stop grandstanding." "I'm not," I said, and I turned my laptop slightly so she could see the timer ticking on the call log, 154, 155, because all calls must be logged within 3 minutes, and her rule had inserted her into the middle of time. "I need an answer so I can comply." Denise's eyes flicked to the timer, and for the first time she looked nervous. She didn't want to approve a call that might later be blamed as overreach, and she didn't want to deny it in front of witnesses. That's the thing about rules. Once you drag them into the light, they start demanding receipts. "Call maintenance," she said sharply. "Thank you," I said, and dialed Marcos right there, speaker low but audible. "Marcos, Building C, Unit 3B, active leak through a light fixture. Approved by Denise," I added, and Denise's head whipped toward me. "Why would you say my name?" she hissed. I blinked innocently. "So maintenance knows it meets management approval," I said. "No interpretation." Marcos muttered, "Jesus," and hung up. I logged the call at 2:59 and hit save like I'd won a tiny, ugly race. The next call came in before I could breathe. "My elevator's stuck," a man said, strained. "My wife is in there." I turned to Denise again. "Approval?" Denise's smile was gone now. "Handle it," she snapped. "Written approval?" I asked, and her face twisted. She grabbed her phone and started typing an email like she could outrun consequence. Ping. Subject line, approval, elevator. She sent it to me, and I replied, "Received," before calling the elevator vendor. It became a rhythm, horrible and efficient. Tenant crisis, Denise's approval email, my received action. Denise's outbox became a machine gun, her screen filling with sent confirmations. Jeff walked out of his office around 4:10, saw Denise standing in the aisle issuing approvals like a frantic air traffic controller, and his eyebrows climbed. Tanya appeared behind him, expression unreadable. Denise saw them and tried to straighten herself into confidence, but her inbox pinged again, this time from Tanya, short subject line. Meeting 4:30. Denise looked at me then, eyes hard, and I realized she wasn't going to let this end as a policy discussion. She was going to make it personal, and she already had my name in her mouth when she turned toward Jeff and said, a little too loudly, "We need to talk about Nora's conduct." The 4:30 meeting was in the small training room that always smelled faintly like dry erase marker and burnt popcorn because someone once tried to microwave a bagel in there and it never recovered. Jeff sat at the head of the table with his laptop open, Tanya beside him with a legal pad, and Denise arrived last like she was entering court. Chin up, phone face down like a weapon she'd agreed not to use. I sat with my laptop too, because bring documentation had become the refrain of my whole week. Denise started before Jeff even finished saying, "Thanks for coming." "Nora has been intentionally disruptive," she said, voice controlled but vibrating underneath. "She weaponizes process to embarrass management. She is creating a hostile environment." Priya and Jamal weren't in the room, but I could feel the whole floor listening through the vents anyway. Jeff held up a hand. "Denise, we watched you spend an hour approving every call in front of the team." Denise didn't blink. "Because Nora forced it. She refused to operate unless I emailed approvals. Then she announced my name to vendors to make me look responsible." Tanya's pen moved. Jeff looked at me. "Nora." I opened my sent folder and rotated the laptop so they could see. Dozens of emails titled, "Approval," Leak, approval. Elevator, approval. Mold. Each from Denise to me, each with my one-word reply, received. I asked for written approvals because Denise ordered all items must be approved prior to action, I said, so I complied. Denise leaned forward. And you did it publicly. I was on a timer, I said, tapping the protocol printout I'd brought again, and our work happens at our desks. Jeff's mouth tightened. Tanya asked, Denise, why did you send an instruction to not involve HR unless authorized? Denise's eyes flashed. Because Nora was spamming HR to undermine me. I slid my phone across the table with the screenshot of Denise's direct order email. This is what I forwarded, I said. One message. Denise's fingers twitched like she wanted to snatch it back. Jeff exhaled slowly. Denise, you can't order employees not to report concerns. Denise sat back, smile returning in a thinner form. Then we have a bigger issue, she said, and her gaze pinned me. Nora has been recording internal communications and distributing them. And Tanya's eyes lifted sharply as Denise added, I want her computer audited. Denise's audit her computer landed in the room like a dropped wrench. Tanya didn't react the way Denise seemed to expect. She didn't gasp or clutch pearls. She just wrote something down and asked, calm as a thermostat, Denise, what do you mean by distributing? Denise's eyes stayed on me. She's screenshotting internal messages, forwarding them around, creating a paper trail to weaponize later. Jeff's gaze flicked between us, irritation sharpening into something more careful. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but the irony was almost funny. Denise had been screaming about obedience, then about not documenting, and now she wanted forensic proof I documented. I have screenshots of written instructions that affect tenant service and reporting, I said. I forwarded one to HR per Jeff's directive. Denise cut in. See? She admits it. Tanya raised a hand. That's not a policy violation, she said, and Denise's mouth tightened. Jeff leaned forward. Nora, do you have anything else saved? I could have said no. I could have played dumb. But Denise had trained me to answer exactly what's asked. Yes, I said. I saved every written directive that changed process. Emails, Teams messages, the addendum. Denise's smile finally cracked. Because she planned this. Tanya's pen stopped. Denise, she said, you instructed her to use only written approval. The existence of written records is a predictable outcome. Jeff rubbed his forehead like he'd just discovered a new headache species. We are not doing a fishing expedition, he said, then looked at me. However, IT will preserve relevant communications. Tanya, coordinate. Denise's eyes lit up like she'd been handed a knife anyway. Great. Full audit, she said, voice sweet again. I want everything. Personal devices too, if she accessed company email. Tanya's eyebrows lifted. That's not happening without cause and legal review. Denise's jaw worked, and I watched her realize she'd overreached in front of witnesses again. Jeff said, Denise, you're stepping into areas you don't control. Denise turned her head toward him slowly. So she can just do whatever she wants? Jeff's voice went flat. She can do her job. Tanya looked at me. Nora, I'm going to ask you not to delete anything. If IT contacts you, cooperate. I nodded. Understood, I said, and I meant it. Strict, literal compliance. Denise pushed her chair back with a scrape. Fine, she said, standing like she was ending the meeting herself. Let's see what it finds. As we filed out, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new Teams message from an unknown number labeled IT security. Hi, Nora. We need access to your workstation immediately. Please do not log out. And when I looked up, Denise was already down the hall, walking fast, like she couldn't wait for the doors to close behind her. Its security arrived like they were responding to a silent alarm. 2 people in polos with badges that said Cyrus and Mina, rolling a small cart with a laptop and a gray hard case. Cyrus smiled like he wished he was anywhere else. Nora Martin? He asked, already looking at my workstation. I kept my hands in plain sight like Tanya's don't delete anything had turned me into a museum exhibit. That's me, I said. I was told not to log out. Mina nodded. Perfect. We're going to do a preservation image. She said it like it was a medical procedure. Denise appeared 3 seconds later, because of course she did. Heels clicking fast, voice pitched for the floor. Good, you're here. I want her phone too, she said, like ordering dessert. Mina didn't look up. We're here on HR's request. Scope is company assets only. Denise's smile twitched. She accessed email on her personal device. I blinked. I haven't, I said. Outlook is blocked on my phone. Denise's eyes cut to me, sharp. Cyrus finally glanced up. We'll verify sign-in logs. He said it gently, but it landed heavy. Jamal was watching from his chair like he couldn't decide if this was hilarious or terrifying. Priya had both hands over her mouth. Denise leaned closer to Mina's cart like she could intimidate a progress bar. Make sure you pull her screenshots, she said. She's been distributing internal messages. Mina clicked a few things and replied, flat. If they exist, they're part of the record. I heard Denise inhale, quick. My team's pinged again, this time from Tanya. Do not engage with Denise. Direct all questions to IT. Strict, literal compliance. I didn't look at Denise again. Jeff showed up mid-image, tie loosened, eyes tired. Denise, step into my office, he said. Not loud, but it cut through the office noise like a blade. Denise laughed once, too bright. This is about Nora's misconduct. Jeff held up a hand. Now. Denise's face tightened, and for a second she looked at me like she wanted me to blink first. I stayed still. Cyrus said quietly, image complete. And Mina printed a little receipt-looking sheet, slid it to me. Chain of custody, she said. Sign acknowledging we collected. I read it, then signed exactly where it told me to. exactly how it told me to. Across the floor, Denise's office blinds slammed shut, and a minute later, her team status flipped from available to offline like someone had yanked a plug.